Hi everyone, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer, and we review games from two different perspectives. I'm all about the mechanics and Maggie is all about the theme, and today we're really excited to be previewing for you Race to the Raft, the new game by Frank West, the follow-up game in the same world as the Isle of Cats.
Yes. We actually find ourselves in the same Isle of Cats, but the boats have left. We did too good a job at packing those boats full of cats, but some cats still remain. These cats are trapped in the island that is now on fire, and the only way out is this one little raft at the other end of the island, and so we have to make sure that we help these cats make their way through across the island, and they're very particular because they only like to move on terrain that is the same color as they are. So that's a bit of a challenge. We also have to do that together.
That's right, in this game we'll be cooperating, so unlike Isle of Cats that's competitive, here we're going to be working together to help get these little cats to the single raft to escape this island. But I want to explain what you're looking at on screen first of all. This is just one scenario of many scenarios that come with the game. This is the introductory first scenario that we're showing you here. Now, before you get started with the game, you're going to set up the scenario by using these mix and match boards. Some of them are larger pieces like this, some of them are smaller, and on one side it will be more covered with fire, and on the other side there will be no fire. So it's going to be a combination of all of these different pieces that come together to make the player board. We'll then follow the scenario guide to add more fire where there needs to be pieces of fire, the raft where we're going to need to get the cats to, and then the individual cat tiles or cards as well, where we're going to have the starting places for each of the cats. Once we have that set up, we're all ready to play, and the objective of this game is to get all of those cats to the raft. But you can see that in this grid-like pattern, there are all different types of terrain, and each of these colored cats only wants to travel along the same color as its body. So we're going to have to work to fix some of these paths here. The way that we're going to do that is that as a group, we're all going to be able to draft 3 cards from 4 different piles. And if you see these 4 different piles, each of these stacks has a different composition, and the composition is shown to you on the back of the card. So where you see more of one color, that means that in that deck, there is a higher percentage of that color. So for example, in this X deck, you have green will take up 1/3 of the spaces in this deck, blue another 1/3, and then the rest is going to be a combination of red, yellow, and purple. So first of all, we need to choose which paths we want to build out. So in this particular game, there is an orange cat, a green cat, and a blue cat. So I might like to pick the card that has a lot of, the deck that has a lot of green and blue. So I might take 2 of those, and one that has yellow and green because they're both in this game as well. And then I will look at these cards, but I will do so in secret. So one key part of this game is that you cannot share or show what is in your hand to the other players. However, in the discussion phase, you can definitely talk about the ability that you have to help each of the cats. So for example, if I had this card, I can't show anyone, but I can say, oh, I've got a really good card to help green. And if everyone says, okay, Amy, you can go ahead and play that card because there's no set turn order, then I will get to put that card down. And I want to get this green cat over to the raft, so I might add it here, connecting it here to a little bit more green to help my cause to get that cat to the raft. Once I do that, I have to now place a piece of fire, and that comes from the bag and is a polyomino tile. So I will reach in, draw out a tile, and now I have to place this piece of fire somewhere adjacent to where fire already exists. So I know that this yellow cat is going to go down here. I know that the green cat's going to go across here. The blue cat needs to go across here as well. So this seems like a little bit of dead space over here. So I might put this tile here out of the way of everywhere where I think I need to make a path. As I'm doing that, as I'm placing my card and as I'm placing the tile, there is no discussion allowed. So at that point, it's all on me to make the right choices for the group. So we continue discussing how we're going to build out the paths using everybody's cards, and we don't draw up the cards. So the round is going to end when everybody has used all of their cards. One way that you can use the card is the way that I just showed you by building some more path. The other way is to move the cat. So if I have maybe not a very good card, I will volunteer it as tribute to get rid of this one card, discard it to the side, and that allows me to move a cat in the beginning phases as far as I can. So for example, I discard that card and this cat can now move through that glorious path that I've built for it as far as I'd like to move it, and then it becomes tired and it lies down. It's important to note that once it's moved once that round, it does become tired, because then it's going to take 2 cards to move that cat again. Now, the reason why you might want to move the cats towards the raft before you finish the path to the raft, is because you're trying to move the cats out of the spaces where you're going to need to put these fire tiles, because pretty quickly you're going to run out of space. So you need to make sure you're moving them all towards the raft to free up this space to place more tiles. Now, there is another interesting dynamic that as we all play cards, so imagine I've used that card and we've used this card and we've used another card. As soon as we've discarded 4 cards by helping to move cats, we're going to have to place a tile, because that triggers a disaster. And again, we pull out another tile piece and place it out somewhere onto the board with no discussion from other people, just the person who triggered the disaster after 4 cards. And what we're going to do is keep doing that until we've made a path so that all of the cats can get onto the raft. And as soon as all 3 of them reach the raft, then we have completed the scenario and we've won. If at any point the fire makes it such that one cat cannot get to the raft, or you've run out of space to place a fire tile, then you lose and you'll have to restart the scenario and try again. So that's the puzzle at its most simplest, but as you move through the scenarios and you'll get to walk through the different tutorials as part of the campaign, the puzzle's going to get harder and there's going to be new things that are introduced. So the first thing is a smaller raft with cat-specific spaces. So for example, in this fictional scenario, pretend that this is an actual scenario, I have a small raft and now there are actual dedicated spots for where the colored cats need to get to. So I can't just return this green cat anywhere to this raft. It has to go to this green space in the corner here. So I have to think about that in terms of the path that I'm building and the direction that I want to come into the raft from. Another additional layer is that not only do you need to get the cats to their right spot on the raft, but you need to get them there in order. So it might be that I need to get the green there first and then the blue there second and then the yellow, orange there third, which means, again, we have to discuss as a group, what order are we going to do this in? And if we're doing these in a particular order, then we all better take the right cards that we need to get, those first cats through. Because what happens at the end of a round, I should mention, is that all of the cats stand back up and we all simply get to draw 3 new cards. So the game continues and continues like that. So that's another complication. You'll also then have these water tokens, which are like your lifeline in the game. In the campaign, it will cost you points to use them, so you won't succeed with the full amount of points if you use them, but basically they will put out a fire tile. So they will remove a fire tile, and you can do that 3 times in a single game. The other thing that you can introduce are these little communication tiles, and there are 2 different types. The first type is really interesting in this game. You can communicate with someone else when it's their turn and they're placing their tile down or their fire tile down in a moment where you're not meant to be talking. You can play this cat tile and then you're allowed to meow to help guide them to the right spot, or to simply warn them off with some screeching meowing so that they second guess what they're doing and maybe take a look at the puzzle again before they do that. The other token is this speaking person token, which allows you to communicate freely with the person that's placing the path or the fire tile. And that can be really useful, but you can only use each of those once in an entire scenario. So you want to be very careful about when you use those. As you move into the advanced scenarios, the one thing that changes is that the cats can now only step 5 steps. So when I said before that you could move as far as you like, you become a little bit more constrained, which means you really need to be discarding cards, and then you start triggering more of these disasters. And when you do trigger a disaster in the advanced game, we have this disaster deck of cards, which is like an event deck in that when that 4-card collection gets triggered, instead of just placing a fire tile, we will turn this over and we will have to do what it says. So this says move 1 cat 1 space, so we would do that, and then place 1 fire tile. They always result in placing more fire tiles, but there's some interesting little twists in there that you'll have to work out how to accommodate within your puzzle. As it gets more complicated, there are additional rafts that have this bonus option where once you get a cat onto the raft, you can either move another cat or draw another tile card. And this move another cat is really important because there's also this little twist where you might need to get the green to the raft at the same time as the orange. But in order to do that, you need to get them both close enough within range, within the 5 steps, and then move the green cat in, for example, and then be able to trigger that bonus to move the orange in. So again, just adding more complexity into the timing of this game. And the last advanced component that I'll talk about are the Orshaks, because they are one of everyone's favorite components of the original Isle of Cats, and they're in this game too. And they add a lot of complexity because these cats, they start from a tile like this where there is a path leading out of that space. So this Orshaks would be on here, and a lot of the cards also have paths on them. So you can see that there is a path, it goes across terrain. And just like the fact that the Orshaks is a wild in the Isle of Cats, here it also ignores all terrain, but here it really needs to have this path in order to move. So you are layering this path on top of different types of terrain to try and get to an Orshak's exit space that has the corresponding line. So that adds additional complexity to the puzzle. But now let's talk about how we feel about the game.
All right. Well, this was quite a surprise because, as many of you may know, we don't tend to enjoy co-ops.
We do not.
But this was one that as soon as we started playing it, we're like, okay, again, let's do that again. Let's do another one. I thought it's a very clever way of kind of nodding back to Isle of Cats in terms of, it's still the polyomino type puzzle. It's still a lot of that kind of color puzzle. You still have the cats, but it's different. Now we're working together, and now it's more like, how do I create this whole path all the way to the raft? And so it's like, it's similar enough that it's like, I feel like I'm back in that world, but it's a whole new, well, quite literally a whole new game.
It is a whole new game. I really like the spatial awareness that you need to play this game because it's similar to Isle of Cats because you're still thinking about those polyomino tiles, but in this game, the different colors that are shown on each of these cards makes for quite a challenge when you're twisting them around and you're thinking, wait, how does that actually connect to, how can I extend that blue path? And you're trying to move them around. And then when you're playing with lots of other people, the way that they place a card can be devastating for the combo that you were just about to pull off, and you're like, oh no, my card would have been better. And so it is a really interesting thing to work on together. I do want to talk about the campaign itself and the way that this game introduces you to all of those layers that I talked about. It steps you into it so nice and slowly. And that's partially because there's all these little components that add complexity, but also because of the way that the board is modular as well. And so when you're playing with a simpler map, often it is using bigger space because the bigger the space with the least amount of fire, the easier it is to make the paths. But then when you get to some of the more advanced ones, you're working with very little space to begin with, and so it gets very challenging.
Very challenging even from the start to go, where are we going to start with the fire? So it's not even just a matter of, what's the order of the cats that we want to, in what order do we want to get them to the raft? It's also, where do we even have any space to start placing those first pieces of fire? And then it's not so much like which cats do we need to get out of the way so that the fire can start going there. I really enjoy that also, the way that you move the cats by kind of discarding a card that you're not going to use or is less helpful. And the fact that they become tired after they do their first move, and so it's going to take you more cards or more effort
I like that
to
too.
move them along.
It also mitigates a little bit of the luck that is involved with drawing from these piles and not knowing what you're going to pick up.
Yeah.
So because of the fact that, one of the players might draw all cards that are really pretty useless for the state of the puzzle, they can then be the person who's sacrificing cards to move cats. So I really like that element. I will talk about the fact that you are actively managing fire the whole way through and basically looking at another spatial puzzle, which is, do we have enough space for the fire, as Maggie was mentioning? But also, these pieces are awful.
They're so big.
It always feels like you're drawing one that you just don't want, and you keep drawing them out, and there are very few small, nice little Tetris pieces. They're all awkward
Very
shapes.
inconvenient shapes.
That are really hard to piece together without getting in the way of your cat. So I really like that as a challenge as well.
I also like, let's talk about the little communication tokens, because obviously the fact that you can't talk when it's decided who's going to actually be placing, until you can't talk the whole time that they're placing and kind of deciding how it's going to go, and you can't talk when they're putting the fire tile. So there's two times there where something can go horribly wrong and you can't do anything about it.
And you just have to watch it happen.
Yeah.
But I will say, though, that does eliminate a bit of alpha gaming, because that means that someone can't just dictate where everybody puts everything, and you don't know what they have in their hands. So they're telling you it's a great piece for blue, but is it a great piece for blue? And then you'll see them place it and you won't be able to do anything about it until...
unless you're using one of your little talking tokens. So I particularly, obviously the speaking one is the most
pretty straightforward.
But the MEOW token is so fun.
It is hilarious. And at first it was like, that's a bit of a gimmick. Like, I don't know how that's actually going to work in the game.
So you can go meow, meow, meow,
but
meow, 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 meow. So it's really...
It created some of the funniest
non-verbal cues of communication really come in. One of my favorite moments was we were playing with your sister, and Amy was using the MEOW token. I was placing the tile, I got really stuck. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I should be doing. I picked a tile that I thought would be good, but then it turned out that when I went to place, I was like, actually, no, it won't actually fit the way that I wanted it to. And then, so Amy took the MEOW token to kind of warm it. Meow, meow. And then Amy's sister was like, oh, okay, I'll take the talking token so that I can actually talk through this. And then she was no help. But then she was like, so I'm going, maybe like this way. And he's like, meow, meow, meow. It's like, Amy seems quite pleased. So she was using her speaking token to translate Amy's meowing. I'm like, I feel like I can understand.
This is a complete waste of the talking token.
But it's like, it creates these fun moments around the table. Which
it really, especially just the turning it over to screech meow when someone is doing something wrong. Where you don't need to necessarily talk. You just need the person to stop and look at what they're doing and reconsider.
I'm like, you stop, and it's like, stop, but it's like, you don't know why are you making me stop? Like, what's going on? And so that's the other part of like the tension sometimes, or the anxiety when you're like, the stress of like, no one can help me while I'm doing this. And so I don't know if I'm going to make a huge error or a huge mistake. Because like, for example, you might be in a situation where, say, we've had this sort of fire spread out, and we really needed to get the cats to come in through here, because say there was like fire here. And then you put a fire tile. That means that now we can't actually put
you can't fit one of these.
You can't actually put another tile to complete the path, and so that would actually potentially lose the game, like in that one.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah,
but that's why it's really important to discuss the plan as a group before you get started. So the temptation is just be like, I've got a great tile, I'm going to go here. But you really need to say, okay, which cat are we going to move first? And in which direction are we trying to go? And then once everybody knows the plan, it's a little bit safer for everybody to independently play their cards.
Yeah.
And we did find that the more we played this game, the more our group got better at communicating with each other.
Yeah.
And this game feels so good when you beat a scenario.
Very satisfying.
It's super satisfying.
Put that final cat, it's like, yes.
And all of the scenarios are rated 1 to 5 as well in terms of difficulty. And it feels so good when you progress and then you're like, oh, how are we going to get through this one?
Yeah.
And then all of those more advanced elements come in and it is really, really difficult. And then you've got that element of the water droplets where if you want an extra challenge, you're trying to get through the scenario without using any of those lifelines. So I just really like the options here and that are available.
So much replayability for that reason. I particularly like the concept that these decks, they give you a clue as to proportionally what's going to be in them.
It's the nerdiest way of communicating.
Yeah, but it's not a guarantee. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I really need green, and you might pick, 3 greens, and none of those cards end up having green. In this case, they did. Sometimes it can happen. So it's one of those like you're kind of hedging your bets as well in terms of going, oh well, I get a bit of a variety because also we might need to move a couple of cats. So I think that's pretty clever.
And it feels like they could have all had plain backs, and you could have just drawn 3 cards and worked with what you picked up. But this makes it feel like you have some kind of control over what you're going to be doing. And I really like that element too, because someone might go really rogue and be like, well, I'm going to just look after the purple cat and just pick up the purple tiles. And it feels like everybody has a little bit of freedom to do something different in the game, even though you should be working together. Yeah. I have really enjoyed our time with this. We've worked through the campaigns that we had available to us, the scenarios we had available to us. We had a condensed version of the campaign, and we worked through every single puzzle. We just had so much fun with this, and every time we finished, or if we didn't beat the puzzle, which was rare, we did pretty well.
But we started into the top,
the really hard ones. But as soon as we didn't, I just wanted to play it again and try and do it, because it's just that type of puzzle. It's really great. It's really smart. The design of this blows my mind. It's pretty incredible.
It feels so simple, and it's so quick and easy to teach. Like it's actually a very, very low overhead in terms of like getting it to the table. The setup is also fairly straightforward. But then the complexity in figuring out how to get those cats through, very, very clever. Should we talk about player count?
Yes. So we played this at 4, 3, 2, and Maggie played it solo. For me, it kind of changed between a bigger group of 3 or 4 people and when just Maggie and I were playing it together. I think that obviously, when there's more people, you have more cards to choose from, because that doesn't change. Everybody still has 3 cards. So there's more likelihood that you're going to have the right cards, but then there's also more likelihood that someone is going to make a mess of it.
Yeah, some kind of miscommunication or something lost in translation.
Yeah, so as it scales to more players, some players might be less confident in the puzzle, but they still need to play the 3 cards in their hand. So at some point, you're going to have to trust them to help with the puzzle. And so that creates more interesting moments, I think, or diverging kind of paths from what you expected was going to happen, and then something else that you really now need to fix.
Might have to pivot a lot more in a higher player count.
Yeah, whereas when it was Maggie and I still felt that same tension of the puzzle, still the same fire and everything going on, but I did feel like when we were working together, because we understood the puzzle more, it felt like we could just get through it a lot quicker, less funny moments with the helping out. I felt like often we would just use one of the talking ones at some point throughout the scenario to discuss with each other. But it's still a great puzzle at 2 or with a group.
Very well at 2. Playing it solo, very simple solo implementation, which I love. And you're essentially you've got your 3, say you've got your 3 cards for yourself, and then you're also getting to draw an additional 3 cards. So you're still getting to have that decision of which cat am I wanting to move first? So say, for example, if I want to I want to finish my green cat, but then the next thing that I want to be able to do is I want to give myself some blues. So I might be looking at, okay, well, I'll get another 3 cards that you'll kind of get from, say, the decks that you have available. And so as I play a card, and play a fire tile, then I'll get to draw up. So say, for example, I put this one, I don't know, I'll put that one there for some reason.
Oh, you could have helped the green.
I know, it's for the sake of the demonstration. I'll place one tile, I'll put my fire tile down, say over there, and then I'll decide, okay, well, I want to keep the green going, so hopefully, let's pick that one up. And so I don't actually know, as the solo player, I don't actually know what the next choice is going to be when I bring them up, but I do have some agency in that when I'm deciding what those 3 cards are going to be that I'm going to be kind of drawing from, then I'm giving myself the right colors, hopefully. And that's all you're doing. And so you're going to be playing until you exhaust those 6 cards, and then that's when all the cats will do their rest phase. And you just keep playing the same way. So the actual puzzle itself felt very, very similar. You're still kind of trying to figure out how to get them through. It actually felt like you have a lot more control. I felt like I had more control because I know exactly, well, these are the only 3 tiles or 3 cards that could be placed down now, and I can do a little bit of forward planning as well, whereas if I'm playing 2-player, I have a rough idea, and I'm kind of communicating a little bit with some clues with Amy about what she might have, but I don't know exactly what shape it's going to be. So I actually really enjoyed this as a solo experience. It is quite an abstract sort of puzzle, so it's probably something that I'd play like with the campaigns. Like I'll gladly play a campaign, and then after that, I'd probably it wouldn't be one that I'd constantly be drawing, like pulling off the shelf. But for people that enjoy this sort of puzzle.
That's right. If you enjoy this abstract spatial puzzle, or if you like polyomino tiles, then you're probably going to have a really great time with this. I can see this really, suiting a whole broad range of gamers, really, because gamers are going to get a lot out of this, especially at the more advanced levels. And then playing this with kids as well, it just makes sense. It's really easy to teach, and it's really fun and satisfying to move those cats out and put them onto the raft. It just feels like you've done something great, and you've, again, rescued the cats. Yeah. So that is our preview of Race to the Raft. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.